Who thinks you don't go far enough.
Who is Lori Myers? And she's never prosecuted a case. And she says, I don't think she even understands what this is about. She says, this statute doesn't work or whatever. You know, the point I made is this.
By the way, you should say, which I'm surprised you haven't said yet, every district attorney in the state was actually part of this deal. Were they not? They're endorsing what you and DeMacy and O'Flaherty are putting forward. 11
DAs, all of whom have the primary responsibility to the public to explain what they do on every single case and are held accountable for this, have supported this bill. In fact, they did a lot of work on it. We tweaked it. We looked at what was, good. We worked hard on this to get what is, I think, a very comprehensive bill to get for the worst offenders and the cases we can prove. You get them in, man. You don't have to worry about the lenient judge. On the cases where you don't.
But you do have to worry about a lenient DA. Part of the argument that is made by the Jessica's Law people, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney General Coakley, is that we want prosecuting attorneys to have discretion, but not so much discretion.
But Jim, the fallacy there is that if you have a lenient DA and you tell him or her that all they can do is charge the case and get 25 years, they won't charge it. They're going to say they say we don't have enough evidence. We're not going to go forward. This is it just boggles my mind, and I'm sorry it makes me crazy that someone who says, oh, this doesn't protect enough kids, there are a whole bunch of things we could do better with kids, but we have now DSS mandated reporting. That is the single thing that keeps kids safe, is that we report abuse now. If we had enforced that, you wouldn't have had the child abuse, the sex abuse clergy issue. To say that a 25 minimum mandatory keeps kids safe is crazy.
Can I just say one more thing? By the way, a lot of people are bitching about what the Attorney General did here in email. Now's your opportunity to talk to her directly. If you're unhappy, ask her the question instead of bitching to us about what you're not happy about. By the way, on a related note, then we got to take a break.
Hold on, it's related to this because I have
totally
one
related.
Okay.
Did you see the Joe Bergantino piece on Channel 4 the other day about continued child abuse in the Catholic Church? You may not have. You should see
it's actually about priests who are in the community,
yes,
right?
With no sex offender.
And by the way, the thing that is most appalling to me, and I know it's a drop-off topic, but not that much. Joe Bergantino, who is as good as they get in that industry, as far as in the journalistic community, asked for an interview with a guy who is at the head of the Catholic Church here to talk about the protection of children.
Would that be the cardinal?
It would be the cardinal. It not only is denied, but then when he goes to an event, some groundbreaking, and tries to ask the cardinal a question about protecting the children, which is, I assume, what everybody should be about, he says, I don't answer questions on this. Is that not, in light of all that we went through here with your predecessor, with this scourge that we had to live through, with everybody praising the Pope for how great his concern was, does that not bother you that the guy who's head of the Catholic Church in this region apparently, at least by word, does not give a damn about this issue?
Well, you're preaching to the choir. I look at whatever. I had a long and difficult time as chief of the child abuse unit on many cases, including those where, despite the evidence, people said they weren't guilty. So let's talk about that problem. Everybody's guilty. Everybody wants these sex offenders in jail, unless but it's not Uncle Joe, and it's not my brother, and it's not my daycare worker. These issues of guilt and innocence. Everybody thinks they know who child abusers are, and they don't. And so we get polarized on guilt or innocence. Leaving that aside for a minute, we have improved the way we interview. We've improved the reporting requirements. The church now has to report. None of that child abuse stuff would have happened in the Catholic Church if they didn't have to report.
Is the church complying with whatever these requirements are?
Well, they do. They now report. They're mandated reporters. As far as I'm concerned, they do. But, we talked about this last time. I'm not convinced that because 5 victims got to see the Pope in secret that's a huge deal.
No,
and we talked about that last time.
It's a very tiny step in the right direction, but it's a tiny step. One last question about this before we go to the break, and then we'll come back and take your calls. Is one of the things that the other side, whoever it comprises, has argued is that there isn't enough pressure on these kids to testify, and that we let the shrinks get in there too much, and that there could be, just as in domestic violence cases, almost dragging the victim in to testify whether he or she wants to go.
I know that's Wendy's theory that every child should be served. No, hey. Look, this is a small community. There are no secrets here. I've heard her say it. I've heard her say it to me, and I just totally disagree with it. I think that she's wrong, and I think it's not in the best interest of kids. Wendy's not a shrink. I'm not a shrink. By the way, Wendy worked in the same child abuse unit that I did. I was her supervisor. I know how she investigated it in cases.
Did she drag the kids in against their will, kicking and screaming?
Sometimes she did, and sometimes she was successful at it. But I don't know where those kids are now, and neither does she. And we don't have to follow up with their mental health. That wasn't our responsibility. And I don't want to be the one who puts that kid on the stand. And by the way, I'll be the first to say that when kids want to testify and they feel supported and they do well, they are great. I mean, they do a good job. On the other hand, parents don't want them to go in. Kids get frightened by it. You put a kid on the stand. The other thing you need to know in these cases, we rarely have DNA. These aren't cases where we have all kinds of forensic evidence. We have a 5-year-old kid and some guy in a suit who looks pretty good and can take the stand. What's the jury going to do? They're told to find beyond a reasonable doubt. No one wants to wrongly convict a sex offender. And people will say to me, we hate drug dealers. We hate drug dealers. You put 12 people in a jury and there's a guy on trial for drugs. He gets off if you do not prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So I'm a little frustrated at this stage of the game with what I think is a fabulous bill that covers a lot of the bases. It answers the lenient judge thing. It gives us discretion. It's in the best interest of kids.
Does Patrick support this, by the way? I didn't read that.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.